Morning to everyone and welcome to this first EU-Brazil conference on digital economy and innovation. My name is Luca Belli. I'm a professor at FGV Law School, and together with my friend Luigi Gambardella, I will be the co-moderator for this event. Before we start, let me just share a brief disclaimer. Of course, all the opinions that will be shared by speakers during the event are personal opinions and do not correspond to any official position by FGV. And of course, all participants are aware that this webinar is going to be recorded. It is public, it will be live streamed, and they are all freely participating to this debate. Now, without further ado, let me introduce the first panelist of our opening section. We have Mr. Thibaut Kleiner, who is Director of Strategy and Outreach at DigiConnect in the European Commission. We have Professor Gorete Pereira Paulo, who is Directress of the FGV Office of Research and Innovation. And last but not least, of course, we have Luigi Gambardella, who is president of the EU-Brazil Association, and that is my partner in crime in the organization of this event. So I would ask Mr. Thibaut Kleiner to open the lens with his opening remarks. Mr. Kleiner, it's a great pleasure to have you here today. Thank you very much for your time, and please, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Luca, and happy to see all friends again. Indeed, my name is Thibaut Kleiner. I'm the Director of Policy, Strategy and Outreach in DigiConnect in the European Commission. So in that capacity, I'm in charge of all our programs funding digital technologies, but also in charge of international affairs. And therefore, I'm really happy to be able to reach out to our Brazilian friends today. And I think it's also a great timing somehow to be able to participate in this dialogue we have, because we just a few days ago also adopted a new strategy for how Europe sees the future in terms of the digital transformation. And we have set to ourselves a series of goals in terms of 2030 with a digital compass that we believe will be useful to navigate in this transformation. And in this strategy, we also outline the importance of the international dimensions for Europe, because we see, in fact, that there is not in the digital area so much difference between what you do internally and what you have to do externally, reaching out to your partners. We believe that to be a credible partners internationally and to be able to help also partners to improve the way they adopt digital technologies, the EU has to do better in terms of its own capabilities. We think that there is more to the world than just the US and China. We think that there are other partners like Brazil, like Europe, who can also have a role to play and who can also contribute to making sure that this digital transformation is for the benefit of our citizens, and that it is really not technology without purpose, but technology really that improves our lives and improves also the way our citizens support and embrace these technologies. We believe that digital transformation is about empowerment. It's about everybody having opportunities. And that's very much what we are putting forward now in this digital decade or digital compass strategy. Now, as regards EU and Brazil, I should say really that there's been a long-term collaboration between us. I think especially at this juncture of Portugal being the presidency, I mean, we have even more this opportunity now to recall all the work we've done together. But really, I mean, Brazil and the EU have been long-term partners. I would just mention here what we did already 10 years ago in the digital agenda in terms of involving digital technologies in areas like telecommunications, Internet of Things, collaboration on digital platforms. Really, EU leadership in 5G has been very strongly also in partnership with some programs in Brazil. Myself, a few years ago, actually, I was in touch with a number of Brazilian partners when I was leading the area of the 5G public-private partnership. And I recall at the time the very fruitful discussions we had in terms of advancing 5G as a technology that is not only for mobile communication, but that is really a transformative capacity for the whole economy. You can use 5G to do new things, you know, from smart mobilities to urban services to Industry 4.0. It is really a technology that can do a lot of very positive things, both in the EU and in Brazil. And you recall there was this joint declaration on 5G between the EU and Brazil, and I think we've done already quite a lot of progress together. In a way, also in terms of regulatory developments, I think that the way that Anatel has developed is very much aligned with what the EU is doing. So I don't want to be too long. Just really welcoming the opportunity to engage further. I think that we should now use the COVID crisis not only as a problem, but that we need to solve. And I think we need still to do a lot of things to get out of this COVID crisis. But we should also build somehow on the boost for digitalization that this COVID crisis has created. Today, if you're not digital, very often it means you will not survive in a number of areas. By contrast, it means that if you accelerate the digital transition, be it at the level of e-commerce, be it at the level of 5G, cybersecurity, be it at the level of artificial intelligence, or the use of data in business models, if you embrace these things as a company, it means that you will be stronger in terms of resilience. It means also that you will be better in terms of competitiveness. And at the end of the day, it also means that there will be more opportunities to grow, to create jobs, and also to have a prosperous future. So let's try together to make sure that this digital transformation is seized as an opportunity, and make sure also that we continue building links between us. I don't want to say too much about the Bella cable, but you know how important it has been and it is for us, and how grateful we are that we are now soon reaching the final line. I don't want also to say much about the EU-Mercosur agreement at this stage, but I think that in general, we are very happy at the level of the European Commission to continue our collaboration with Brazil. And I wish you really today a very fruitful discussion in that context. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kleiner, for the excellent remarks and for this injection also of optimism. We need injections, and injections of optimisms are very welcome lately. And now to go on with these first opening remarks, I would like to ask Professor Goetsch to provide her statement. She is the outstanding woman behind our many research successes. So it's an excellent, great pleasure to have you here with us today. Thank you very much, Goetsch. The floor is yours.
Good morning to my colleagues at this panel. Good morning to everybody who is participating in this webinar. Thank you very much, Luca, for the invitation. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here And I'd like to speak not only, as you mentioned, as a part of FGV team in the research area, but also as a national contact point for the EU science and innovation programs. The last program, the Horizon 2020, I was the NCP for social science and humanities. And in this new program, Horizon Europe, we have a very challenging agenda set in the pillar two clusters for social sciences and humanities. And the themes for social sciences, they are transversal in the other areas. So for example, digitalization, that's the main theme of this webinar, is one that is transversal. So that is, as mentioned by Mr. Thibault, a theme that includes all kinds of projects and initiatives in the area of urban mobility or sustainable cities, green cities, health, public policy. So this digitalization is a transversal theme, as most of the themes linked to the social science and humanities areas. Very briefly, I have just 2 slides that I would like to share with you. So I think that you can see. The first slide is just a remark about Fundação Getúlio Vargas and its positioning, as we point out here, is that Fundação Getúlio Vargas, it's a think tank based on research. So if you look at the criteria that our best positions are in the ranking for the University of Pennsylvania, we have the best positions in the area of development policy and impact on public policy. But it's a work that we do based on research. And considering research, we focus on research in the social science and humanities area, mainly those linked to, so we try to have our research with high impact in the areas of quality education, no poverty, reducing inequalities, good health and well-being, responsible consumption and production, sustainable cities and communities, decent work and economic growth. Those are the sustainable development goals that we have a more direct impact. And as I mentioned at the beginning, digitalization is a transversal theme that helps us to contribute to achieving the sustainable development goals. So that's my contribution for this first panel. And I'd like to thank you, everybody to the attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Baraj, and thank you also for highlighting the transversal nature of digital transformation, and also indeed the transversal nature of the potential partnerships, and there's a lot of room for cooperation on each of these pillars that you very rightly highlighted. Now, let me give the floor to Luigi, who is president of EU-Brazill Association. He was probably the first one organizing this kind of synergies and events almost 10 years ago. So please, Luigi, it's an honor to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Luca, and thank you for the great work of FGV. It's very prestigious to have the opportunity to do something together with you. And also let me thank, because I think I have to say, thanks to EU mission to Brazil, to the Brazilian mission to the EU, and in particular also to the Portuguese Presidency, because they gave us their formal support. And also I have to thank a few people. I should thank everybody, but Thibault, thanks a lot for your participation. I would like to thank the 2 ambassadors that in a few minutes they will speak. Ricardo Castañera, who is digital attaché for the Portuguese presidency, and José Manuel Fernandez, president of EU-Brazill, the delegation to the European Parliament. We attach a great importance to the European Parliament, and so we are very pleased that he is with us, and all the friends. Let me say a few words. In fact, Luca, I was now checking. When we born, EU-Brazill started in 2004. At that time, was very close to the agreement with EU-Mercosur. They say, well, in a few months we'll have the agreement. We are in 2021, and we have not yet the agreement finalized. But let's look at the future. The good thing of digital is that it's very much linked to the future, and what counts is the future. And I would like to use also what Thibault said at the beginning, the new document of the European Commission, which is very important, because the digital transformation is a long journey. That's we should learn together. We have to work daily, but for a long journey. It's not short. And so we have to work for the next digital decade. Now, you know that basically this document, which Thibault said has been presented a few days ago, and is based on 4 main areas. Digital skill. I could say a lot of words, but I don't say anything. You know how important, we know all how important it is, and the lack of skills that we could have both in Europe and in Brazil. The importance of enhanced digital infrastructure, the infrastructure of the future, fiber, 5G. Digital transformation, I believe that is the real challenge, because what you have to change is the industry. We have to change a small and medium enterprise. And the bigger challenge I see in front of us, we have to switch the focus for an internet for consumer to an industrial internet, which means new business model working together with the vertical industry. Last but not least, and we know how important has been digitalization of public services. We know that all these issues of traceability for COVID-19. Now, let me say a few words and finish, because I know that the time is very limited. There are many areas where Brazil and Europe could work. Many: artificial intelligence, big data, blockchain, and all of them are very fascinating, and there is an interest also from the business side to do more. But I would like to mention just 2 in particular. The first, and also to show how it's important to when we speak about digital transformation. What is one important sector in Brazil? Agriculture. Agriculture is very important. We know that, by the way, the delay for the EU-Mercosur agreement has been, unfortunately, for meat and chicken and so on. But agriculture means today also digital, means smart farming, means the introduction of new technologies. And I would like to encourage the whole party to focus on what can be done and how we can bring together the industry and think tank and university on specific projects that could be developed. And the second, obviously, especially in this period, health. We saw what happened with COVID. We see incredible transformation. I was reading the document that, just to give you one number, the telemedicine consultation grew more than in 1 month, more what they did in 10 years. So there is a huge transformation in the health sector, and think about the importance to have access for the electronic health. Why we don't work together, Europe and Brazil, in order to have a common sharing of data, interoperability in such important matter? I make just these 2 examples. I could speak for very long, but I cannot do that because we have a very strict agenda and I want to respect it. But just to let you know that I think that we have in front of us a lot of opportunity, and it's important that we do all together more effort in order to give more visibility to what is happening in Europe to Brazil and what Brazilians doing, which sometimes we don't know in Europe. Thank you very much, Luca, and now I leave again the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Luigi. And just before to give you the floor and to start the first section that we are going to have, I just wanted to point out three main challenges and three main avenues for cooperation I think would be useful for the discussion of today and to support then how the unfolding of the next panels. I see really three main pillars of cooperation from micro to macro between EU and Brazil. The first, and I think most obvious, is personal data regulation. The Brazilian new General Data Protection Law just entered in force in September, although part of it, the sanctions, will enter in force in August. Brazil has created a new data protection authority, ANPD, that has just been created and has a huge tasks of regulating a lot of very fuzzy provisions that are in the law. Exchange of best practices between the ANPD and the European counterpart of the European Data Protection Board will be key to allow synergy between the two blocks. It will also be key to have this kind of synergy to facilitate what will be the adequacy decision that the European Commission will have to take to demonstrate, to assess whether the European framework provides guarantees that are comparable to those provided by the European framework. On the other hand, the ANPD, the Brazilian regulator, will have to build its own adequacy mechanism, still has to build it, has planned to build this in 2022, to then assess and give adequacy to the European framework. So we have a huge opportunity for cooperation and for research on this first field. The second most obvious field, of course, is infrastructure. Mr. Thibaut Kleiner mentioned the Ella Link submarine cable entering in force, opening in mid-2021. It is 72 terabytes of new connectivity between Europe and Brazil, a huge opportunity for internet access. Another huge opportunity is the 5G spectrum auction. The rules have just been approved by Anatel, and needless to say that two of the leading providers of 5G equipment are European, Nokia and Ericsson, and there will be huge opportunity for investment and cooperation in 5G networks that will have to be standalone networks according to the new Anatel rules. The last but very important opportunity for cooperation is, of course, e-services, e-commerce and platforms. Mr. Kleiner was mentioning the new rules that are going to be discussed by the European Union, the Digital Service Market Act and the Digital Service Act and Digital Market Acts, both aim at tackling global challenges, competition in big platforms, interoperability, content moderation, challenges on which we are working, of course, at FGV, and we are very ready to also contribute to this debate, and challenges that are global in scope and scale. And they are not challenges only inherent to Europe or to Brazil, and cooperation amongst these two very important partners is key. And of course, we are very ready to contribute to this cooperation. Having said that, I would like now to give the floor to Luigi for the moderation of the first segment, thanking once again our excellent speakers of this first opening segment, and I will see you again in 45 minutes for the third segment of this session.
Luca, thank you very much for your very interesting contribution. Now, let me give immediately the floor to the first speaker, Marcos Galvan, Ambassador of Brazil to the EU. Galvan is one of the most senior diplomat of Brazil in Itamaraty. Is very high ranking, and I think the fact that he's ambassador here in Brussels means how much importance Brazil attach to European Union. And I would like to give immediately the floor to him just to have his view on the present and future relation in digital between Europe and Brazil. Thank you very much for your presence.
Well, thank you very much, Luigi, for the invitation and for helping organize this event, which we must also thank Fundação Getúlio Vargas for, who I thank in the person of Luca Belli and also other friends who are around, such as Renato Flores and Goretti Pereira Paulo. And I salute the many friends also who are here. Some go back a long way. I salute my colleague Inácio Ibanez, my counterpart in Brazil. Also Member of Parliament José Manuel Fernandez, who is the chair of the Brazilian, of the Delegation for Relations with Brazil, and who is a key player in relations between the EU and Brazil, and whom I think I can call a friend, un amigo. Also thank Mr. Thibaut Kleiner for taking part. And also salute the Portuguese Presidency and the person of Ricardo Castanheira. And bom dia a todas e a todos no Brasil. First of all, I'd like to thank, which I've already done, the organizers here for this event. And as I told them, unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave shortly before 11 Brazil time because I have a conference that was already scheduled. But the Deputy Chief of Mission, Carlos Villanova, and Gustavo Raposo, my colleague who's standing in for Marcelo Martinez today, will be present, and I will watch the video as soon as my conference following this is over. As you know well, or many of you do, Brazil and the EU have a strategic partnership, which was established in 2007. This has sprawled into dozens of sectoral dialogues in diverse areas such as health, sustainable development, and innovation, among many others. As the years went by, some of them flourished and others, unfortunately, did not. They came to a standstill, some of them. Be that as it may, I think it's correct to say that one of the most present and prolific aspects of this partnership has been the exchange we have had, in which Mr. Kleiner mentioned. We have kept active over time in the area we initially called ICTs, or Information and Communications Technologies. Thus far, we have held 11 editions of the Brazil-EU Dialogue on Information Society and Digital Economy, the last of which only a couple of months before the outbreak of the pandemic in November 2019. Then in Brussels, a high-level Brazilian delegation met with Deputy Director Ruana and several of his colleagues at DG Connect and the European External Service. And I was glad to be part of that exercise. This regular dialogue, as Mr. Kleiner mentioned, has created strong personal and professional relationships on both sides, which may account for its long-term important results, both in terms of effective regulatory and technical exchange, as well as regarding research and innovation projects we set up together in areas such as 5G, cloud computing, Internet of Things, big data, artificial intelligence, and high-performance computing that some of you have mentioned before. A concrete example of a positive outcome in this area was the bilateral dialogue related to users' right to privacy and of personal data and consumption patterns on the internet. It's a well-known fact that has been mentioned already that that Brazil was inspired by the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, when our regulators decided to promote a national legislation on that same field, which went into force a few weeks ago in the form of the Lei Geral de Proteção de Dados Pessoais. Certainly the proposals recently introduced by the European Commission for the regulation of electronic platforms, the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, will also draw attention on our side of the Atlantic. And the same logic will certainly apply in other areas such as artificial intelligence, which will be key to the future that is being shaped as we speak. In the domain of research and innovation, I give you the example of Project Futebol, which funnily enough has nothing to do with the great sport itself. The acronym stands for Federated Union of Telecommunications Research Facilities for an EU-Brazil Open Laboratory. But I'm sure the project coordinators work hard to come up with that name, which is quite inspired. It was a project co-financed by our Ministry of Science and Technology and Innovations with the objective of establishing the required infrastructure so that researchers from Brazil and Europe may work together in the design and creation of prototypes and in testing applications in robotics using the technology of the Internet of Things. Such joint cooperation is of foremost importance for the development of solutions in areas such as Industry 4.0, 5G, and autonomous vehicles, to name just a few. Brazil and the EU also met separately on a yearly basis in order to discuss and coordinate positions on topics exclusively related to cybersecurity and hybrid threats. The last time we did this was in February 2020, only weeks before we went into lockdown and working mostly from home. With the European External Action Service, we spent a full day discussing fundamental items of the bilateral and multilateral agenda, such as the ongoing negotiations in the context of the United Nations. The relationship as a whole will surely gain momentum after the successful conclusion and entry into force of the Mercosur EU Association Agreement, and bring forth a dynamic future for the bi-regional agenda, which should also include the digital agenda. Both sides can benefit from this cooperation. Both face challenges out there in a very competitive environment. Only this morning I was reading the Financial Times here, and it had a piece on the challenges faced by the European microchip industry, and not for lack of investment and resources, to survive the squeeze from the US and Asian competitors in a world where they are very strong. Finally, a word on the Mercosu EU agreement and sort of on its link with what we're talking about today. While the Mercosu EU agreement is in many respects very advanced and has WTO plus provisions in several areas, including the Trade and Sustainable Development chapter, to mention one example, it essentially does not encompass much in terms of digital trade. Perhaps that is a reflection of the fact that it was negotiated, as everyone knows, for 20 years and concluded less than 2 years ago. In the realm of market access and services regarding e-commerce, we agreed the recognition of documents and electronic signatures, in addition to promoting consumer protection and joint collaboration in combating spam. But it does not go further than that. And in this sense, it actually reflects the so far limited discussion that has taken place in the WTO about the subject. At any rate, Brazil has been involved from the start, which was in 2019, the same year we concluded our negotiations on the trade part of the agreement, in WTO negotiations towards a possible, discussions rather, towards a possible plurilateral e-commerce negotiation. Not only in the WTO, but even in very recent free trade agreements, the inclusion of digital trade is still not a given. The EU-UK agreement, however, is innovative in this regard, and it contains an advanced chapter on digital trade, but this should be seen in the very specific context of Brexit and European integration, which is quite singular. In South America, Brazil and Chile modernized in 2018 a bilateral trade agreement to include the elimination of roaming for data and mobile telephone charges, in addition to more detailed provision on the facilitation of electronic commerce. The political pillar of the Mercosu EU agreement complements this approach, as it sets up a subcommittee for international cooperation, which shall encompass aspects of the digital agenda, including, among others, electronic trade, research and innovation, capacity building, investments and job creation, small and medium-sized companies, e-government, and global internet governance. Concretely, Brazil has already proposed to the EU a year ago that we jointly assess the possibility of establishing an agreement on the mutual recognition of and certification of digital signatures, which has expanded gradually to other Mercosur member states according to their capacities in this area, will potentially reduce the bureaucracy of trade operations among the two blocs. All of this digital agenda will receive an extra impulse with the entry into operation of the transatlantic submarine cable that was already mentioned, that will connect Brazil and the EU through Portugal next June, a project that will certainly be detailed by my colleagues at this table. Brazil will continue to hold this topic high among the priorities of our bilateral relationship in the years to come. keeping in mind that the innovations that are now emerging will continue to transform the way we live, for the better in most cases, but sometimes, unfortunately, also for the worse. And we must work together to avoid the potential negative side effects, and above all, to maximize the good that such progress can bring to our societies. Thank you to you all for the invitation and for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you for your great contribution. Thank you very much, and let's hope that we have in the future other occasion to discuss further the cooperation in such important matters. Thank you. Let me pass the floor to Patricia Allen. She's Segretaria di Desenvolvimento Economico, Scienza e Tecnologia do Estado di São Paulo. We felt it was very important to have such important representative for a local government. Digital cannot be done only at the national level. We know the importance of local government. São Paulo, by the way, is such a big region and is even as GDP bigger than many European countries. So, and we know that São Paulo is the engine of innovation, technology, industry, and therefore we would like to listen from Patricia what São Paulo is doing and how she feels that we could cooperate with São Paulo in order to boost investment and business cooperation. Patricia, the floor is for you. She's not here, so not yet. She's joining us, so and I'm sorry for this. I pass the floor to now the European side. Ignacio, I would like to thank a lot the ambassador of EU to Brazil, Ignacio Ibanez, because it's an honor for us to have him with us. We had in the past a good relation with the previous ambassador who have been all promoted. I think the previous person who was doing your job now is the Minister of Defense in Portugal. So we know that this will be luck also for you, for your good future. And really, thanks a lot for your presence. It's very important for us. And I pass the floor to you. And if you give your view on how you see the agenda of today and what are the main challenges on what you would like to see in the future agenda. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Luigi. In my case, I've been promoted. I was vice minister in Spain, and now I am ambassador here in Brazil, which is really the promotion we are all looking for, at least in my case. Let me start, first of all, saying some words of solidarity on the difficult period we are going through, especially here in Brazil with the COVID-19 pandemic, whose persistence calls for a continuous attention, strong cooperation and solidarity among us, and Brazil can, of course, count on the EU. I would like to salute also the members of this panel, starting with my good friend, Ambassador Marcos Galvan, as distinguished diplomat and my homologue in Brussels at the Brazil mission at the European Union, and also to Ricardo Castanheira from the permanent representation of Portugal, the member states that now holds the rotating presidency of the European Council. Also, thank you, Luigi Gambardella, that you have also a long-standing interest in the relation between Brazil and the European Union. My compliments to the other participants in this event that counts with a very interesting list of speakers. Greetings also to all those who are attending, hoping that our exchanges will be a source of information and encouragement to get more involved in EU-Brazil cooperation. Let me also address my congratulations to Fundação Getúlio Vargas for putting the spotlight on something as important for our future as the digital transformation. The challenging situations created by the COVID pandemic has shown us how important it is to look beyond the most immediate issues and better understand how the world is evolving and how can we integrate in our priorities a long-term vision. The massive investment needed to kickstart our economies should be seen as an opportunity to build a more sustainable, resilient, and fair world for the next generation. This is why the European Recovery Plan will put 1.5 trillion euros to address our generational challenges, the green and digital transition, which are now even more important than before the crisis started. By fast forward on the twin green and digital transition, we want to strengthen the resilience of our society while preserving the benefits of an open economy. We will support our partners around the world and push for a renewed and reinvigorated form of multilateralism. This call for a reinvigorated agenda of international cooperation to better respond not only to COVID pandemic, but also to rebuild our economies is an essential point. It was actually one of the key conclusions emerging from this year's edition of the EU-Brazill Dialogue on Microeconomic Affairs, with the participation of the Ministry of Economy and the Central Bank of Brazil. As stated previously, the pandemic highlighted the importance of digitalization across all areas of our society. New technologies have kept our businesses and public services running and made sure that trade could continue flowing. They have helped us all to stay connected, to work remotely, and to support our children's learning. We believe this has triggered wider structural changes in our daily life and in our economy. Probably we will have more teleworking, more e-learning, more e-commerce, and more e-government in the future. The EU proposals for digital recovery are built around 4 lines of actions. The first is about investing in more and better connectivity. This involves 5G, but also other connectivity infrastructure such as the optical fiber. This is not limited to the inner space of the EU. It involves also partner countries, as illustrated by the Bela cable, linking Brazil and Portugal, but de facto with the far-reaching objective of connecting the European Union to South America and in the future to other parts of Latin America. And I have to remind here the decisive role of the EU-Brazil partnership to make this a reality, not only by launching the idea in the EU-Brazil summit in 2014, but for sustaining it with essential political and financial support despite the challenging times we went through. A second area of interest deals with the industrial and technological dimension of the digital transformation. It means investing in digital capacities and capabilities in strategic areas such as artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, secure communication, data and cloud infrastructure, 5G and 6G networks, supercomputers, quantum and blockchain. Also, in this domain, as illustrated in the previous intervention of Thibaut Kleiner, we have a well-established cooperation with Brazil that we expect to see further developed in the upcoming Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Program. The third line is about exploring the potential of data economy as a motor for innovation and job creation. It means making data available for businesses to develop new products and services. There are plenty of opportunities in the traditional industry sectors in support of green transition, in health, in mobility, and in the public administration. This also calls for clear data sharing and data governance rules. As we have done on the data protection legislation, we wish to share our experience on these matters with Brazil. The fourth one is the need for a fairer and easier business environment. The nature of digital platforms is such that they tend to benefit almost disproportionately from the economies of scale and become dominant market players. We need to explore the opportunities offered in some market segments, such as public procurement, to lower the barriers to entry of new players. Our exchanges with Brazil in this area have been very encouraging. Thibaut Kleiner already provided quite an informative overview of the relevant points of the communication on Europe Digital Decade, digital targets for 2030. Let me add a couple of words on a point that we have been working quite intensively, having in mind countries like Brazil. It is part of the international partnerships of the digital decade and concerns the Team Europe initiatives that combine resources of the EU and its member states, working with world-leading European companies, including via development and networking of digital innovation hubs. Another relevant development concerns the work developed in multilateral instances such as the G20 and OECD towards a global consensus-based solution to address the taxation of the digital economy. This is another matter discussed in the recent EU-Brazill dialogue on macroeconomic affairs. I would like to take this opportunity to address a general message highlighting the strategic importance of the EU-Mercosur Association Agreement. Beyond its direct economic benefits in terms of increase of export and creation of jobs, I would like to highlight its structural impact and the spillover effects that it will generate. While the EU-Mercosur Association Agreement is still very much focused on the more traditional sectoral vision of the economy, with its chapter on telecommunication and e-commerce, as it was rightly mentioned by Ambassador Galvan, we wish to see it as a point of departure for more ample exchanges on the important theme of regulation of digital services and digital markets. Even in its form, it already includes a number of provisions on aspects such as norms and standards applicable to equipment, such as those being used in the implementation of the future 5G infrastructure. Also, in this area, we see quite favorably our engagement with Brazilian entities dealing with relevant standards and certification procedures, such as Anatel, and perhaps in more limited manner in Metro. I would like to reinforce the message about EU commitments to an even more dynamic EU-Brazil partnership that involves not only the government sphere, but expand to other actors, private companies, investors, innovators, and other civil society actors. We need a collective engagement to unleash the creative energy of all the actors, making of the digital transformation a path through to a more secure, more resilient, and more inclusive future. Thank you very much. Back to you, Luigi.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. Thank you very much, Ambassador. I appreciate very much what you said. And also at the end, I think this is the cooperation between industry, institutions, think tank, university is very important. We should work all together. We are all on the same side. And because technology is complex, requires knowledge, know-how, sometimes it's difficult if you don't follow. So the role of industry in this sector is particular, I think it's particularly important because the industry has the know-how. And we have to work together with the industry because industry is part of the society. And thanks a lot. And I hope in the future we'll have a future occasion of cooperation. And now let me give the floor to Ricardo Castanera, because Ricardo, first of all, let me thank him. He's a friend and he is the right person. Sorry, Ricardo, meanwhile, Patricia, she has arrived. Patricia Ellen. Ricardo, I will give you the floor later. Sorry for this change. Patricia Ellen is Secretaria di Desenvolvimento Economico, Scienza e Tecnologia dello Stato di Sao Paulo. Patricia, I said we really wanted to have Sao Paulo because we believe that innovation, digital transformation will happen at local, regional level. So local government, regional government will have a very important role to play. Let's think only about smart cities, so mobility, urban mobility. Something big will happen, a new revolution is very close. So And we believe that obviously Sao Paulo is more than a region. Sao Paulo in Europe could be a country. The GDP of Sao Paulo is very important for Brazil, and we know that many companies are established in Sao Paulo, and we know that João Doria, which by the way speak a perfect Italian, would like to have more business cooperation with European industry, more investment, more cooperation, and I would like to give the floor to you to understand what Sao Paulo is doing and what is your agenda in the digital field, and how you see the cooperation with Europe and the potentiality that you see from your side. Thank you very much for having joined us today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Luigi, for the invitation. Can you hear me well?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. I would like also to welcome Mr. Ambassador Marcos Galvan, Ambassador of Brazil to the EU. I also would like to welcome Mr. Ignacio Ibanez, Ambassador of the EU to Brazil, and Mr. Ricardo Castanheira. In my name and in the name of the Governor of São Paulo and the whole government team, I would like to thank you for the invitation. And as you mentioned, yes, for São Paulo, technology and the digital economy and innovation is a key priority. As you may know, in the last few years, as everywhere in the world, we are facing all the difficulties of the pandemic, but São Paulo honored its commitment to keep all the investments in science, technology, and innovation. So São Paulo is not only the main innovation technology ecosystem in Brazil and Latin America, but also, unfortunately, one of the only places in the country today where all the investments were kept, and we are actually increasing the investments. As you know, when you see and look around the world, all the countries that are succeeding in the fight against coronavirus are actually investing more in science and technology, not only in vaccines, but also in science and technology in general, because in this pandemic, we lived 6 years in 6 months. Before joining the government, I was in the private sector. I was a partner at McKinsey first, and just before joining the government, I was CEO for a technology company in healthcare. And I also had the privilege to be one of the leaders of the national plan for Internet of Things in Brazil. Internet of Things itself, as one of the main technologies to boost the digital economy, can add to our economy, to the whole country's economy, almost 1 trillion reais actually per year up to 2025 onwards. And that would be almost the same economy of the whole pension economy, the pension reform economy, for us to have an idea. That means that if we apply Internet of Things as a technology to fight inequality and also to improve the quality of services, reduce costs, increase efficiency, we can add up to 1 trillion reais every year from 2025 onwards. When we did this study, we actually considered all the technologies being implemented gradually, and what we saw with the pandemic is that most of the technologies were implemented in a very short period of time without all the preparation of the population and all the companies all over the world. Brazil has a special challenge because it's one of the most unequal countries in the world. So of course we had more difficulties, and our population right now is facing this challenge. So exactly because of that, it's so important to keep investing in science and technology. But what we saw is that nationally, the budget for science and technology that we had in 2019 or 2 years ago decreased to 1/3 of that budget that we had these 2 years ago. So we need to create a mobilization to bring these investments back, both public and private, because our situation is unsustainable if we don't keep investing in science and technology. Yesterday, we had an important commitment from the federal government, and I see that our ambassador is here, which is to protect our Lei da Informática investments together with Lei do Bem, because these investments are important in all the space. And we have more than 200,000 jobs in technology that today depend on those investments coming from the informatics or technology law. So I'm giving these examples in being a little bit more specific, because if you think about the opportunities that we have in Brazil for the digital economy, they are incredible. We have one of the most digitized societies in the world. We have a very high penetration of mobile phones, of smartphones, and that is growing quite quickly, keeps growing and grew very quickly throughout the pandemic. But we need to invest in this opportunity so that it becomes actually a real impact and not a challenge that's going to increase the conditions of inequalities that we have in our country today. I'm an optimist, so I know we'll be doing that. If I could only synthesize, to me, the main opportunities are around healthcare, not only because of the pandemics, but even before was already the main opportunity that we had in the country. The second opportunity is in smart cities. The third one is in agriculture, and the fourth one is in advanced manufacturing. I mentioned Internet of Things, but we have many others. To tackle that, we need to put the plans in practice, we need more investment, and we need more public and private partnerships. Thank you very much for your invitation, and I'm here.
Thank you very much, Patricia. I think, and I don't say this just to please you, but Sao Paulo should be proud to have a person like you and with your knowledge in this position. Usually some politicians, they cover position and they don't have any knowledge. So I think this is some very good signal from your city, for your region. And I want to tell you that we would like very much engage with you, in particular, how we could help to create a smart city. There are many ideas, and we will really like them if we have other occasion to discuss this, because I'm convinced that if we could put together, there are a lot of potential investors, but there are no projects, and there is a lack of projects, and therefore would be interesting to see what we could do together. Thank you very much, Patricia, and I hope we can stay in touch also in the near future.
Thank you. It'll be a pleasure. We'll be launching our Smart Cities program next month, so it's a very good moment for us to engage on the topic.
Thank you, Patricia. And now let me give the floor to our friend Ricardo Castanera. Ricardo has a very important role, is playing a very important role, because he's the digital attaché for all the digital matters, and we know how important it is in this moment in Europe, the digital matter. And Ricardo represents the Portuguese government, the permanent representation of Portugal to the
Luigi, I think that we lost you for a while.
Sorry. Now you are there? Okay, sorry, I had a problem. So Ricardo, I was saying that you play a very important role, because digital is today is everything. We see the importance of digital is growing on a daily basis, and also you are doing this on behalf of the Portuguese government. So you also chair the digital task force area of working group, which represent all the country in this sector. So you worked in Brazil, you work in the private sector, so you have different understanding, you have a broad understanding of the different point of views. And I would like very much to ask you, just if you could give us the flavor of the digital program in the Portuguese presidency, and what you think should be done to increase the cooperation, in particular with Brazil, which you know very well. And thank you, Ricardo, for your support and for the support of the Portuguese presidency. Thank you again.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here with you today. Luigi Gambardella, very good and old friend, but also Luca Belli. It's really an honor to share the stage with top-level panelists. And also, as you've mentioned, it's also a chance for me to coming back home, I would say. I lived for almost 7 years in Brazil. and I still do have there very, very good and great friends. Now, it's really, or I'm glad to take this opportunity to share the Portuguese presidency's role for the digital transformation during this period of time, as we do have the presidency of the European Council. As you know, we are, and it has been said already by other panelists, we are at the beginning of a new legislative cycle. For example, last year we were able to close the multi-financial framework, which is a top priority piece for the European Union, and also the Brexit deal, for example. But now we are focused on making things happen. And the Portuguese presidency, let me remind it, the presidency's motto is time to deliver a fair, green, and digital recovery. And today I would like to call your attention and talk a little bit more about the Portuguese presidency's vision and work in the digital specific pillar. Let me add some important also political facts. Portugal, as you know, is a country with a strong commitment to openness. And in the last few years, we have seen how protectionism, isolationism trends have been growing in some regions and very important countries all over the world, but even in the EU. Portugal has always stood for the creation of links and bridges. That's our history. And a good example is, of course, the Mercosur agreement that has been mentioned for several of you, which we have always pushed for. And when we presented the presidency priorities to the European Parliament last January, our Prime Minister, Antonio Costa, clearly stated this once and once again. And also one important aspect is, Luigi, for Portugal, when we talk about the transatlantic relationship, we don't only mean the relations between the European Union and the United States. No, it's not just about that. For us, transatlantic means much more. It means all the Atlantic area, north and south, including Europe, North America, but South America and Africa too. This is part of our vision, a part of our history. And this holistic view is always in our minds, not only for obvious historical reasons, or because we share the same language and we have strong community ties with all those regions, but because we understand that the geopolitical and the geoeconomic importance of strengthening the Atlantic region is for mutual benefit. And we are absolutely convinced that both our regions will increase, Europe and South America, and specifically Brazil, their competitiveness and global influence if we work more and more together on strategic areas for the future, such as the digital domain. Let me now share with you some very important topics for our presidency, and that's how we want to leave a political stamp in the European digital transformation. It's by preparing some political initiatives which will be consolidated next Friday in ministerial declarations. And the policy subjects that we choose show very well the areas that we consider to be of great strategic importance and can be also important steps to enhance the cooperation, like you asked me, with Brazil, not just gov, but also companies. The first one will be on international connectivity. The second one on startup and entrepreneurship. And the third one on green ICT, the digital and green or twin transition. And it will, all those three ministerial declarations going to be presented and signed next 19th of March during a Digital Day event, which is co-organized by the Commission and the Portuguese presidency. Let me now give a little bit a zoom on those three important aspects. On international connectivity, because it's really a very important one, and we believe that it's really an indispensable pillar for the EU digital leadership. And as it has been already mentioned, our contribution also to this EU Atlantic Data Gateway platform, it will be with the inauguration, as has been mentioned by the ambassador, on June the 2nd of the Ela-Link submarine cable, the first cable that will tie South America and Brazil, northeast Fortaleza, to the south of Lisbon, Sinj, which is a milestone of our presidency. And we seek really to, with this ministerial declaration, going to be signed next week, to call the Commission to exactly develop this European data gateway platform strategy that places international connectivity as one of the main streams of action in the European digital strategy. More initiatives of this kind would be most welcome, of course. But because we believe that there is much to gain from connecting international cables between member states and from the EU in general to other parts of the world. Personal and industrial data flows and international trade volumes in digital services will grow exponentially. So it is absolutely crucial that Europe develops a holistic future-ready data infrastructure that can enable the EU to harness the benefits of the data economy. The second important ministerial declaration to be signed is on Startup Nations Standard. We give, as presidency, a great importance to this topic because we believe that entrepreneurship is at the heart of local, national, and European economic growth. The bulk of our economies are SMEs, and these must be given the best possible conditions to scale up. We like to call ourselves in Portugal a startup nation. We have several initiatives to boost the startup ecosystem, such as, for example, to host the Web Summit each year, which is the most important startup event all over the world. But we came to the conclusion, Luigi, that despite having the biggest absolute number of startups, the European Union loses in relative indicators when compared to other regions, such as the United States, Israel, or even Singapore. And the COVID crisis increased the challenges faced by startup entrepreneurs. So we thought that now is the time to propose a political initiative to gather efforts to launch this EU Startup Nation Standard of Excellence, to ensure that all European startups and scale-ups benefit from the best practices underpinning Europe's and the world's most successful startup ecosystems. It will be for sure open in a moment to non-European startups too, and to enhance the cooperation. And this is an opportunity for Brazilian startup ecosystem too. And the third one, Luigi, on the twin transition. We don't need to explain how important it is, especially now when we are in a moment where we need to recover from the crisis. But at the same time, we know that we must recognize that the use of technologies can really enhance sustainable process, increase energy efficiency, and contribute to circular economy. We will sign a very important declaration, and also the private sector will launch a twin transition digital green coalition, which is also an opportunity for Brazilian companies that are already based in Europe to get together and emphasize the principles of the ministerial declaration. Last word on fundamental rights for the digital world. Portugal wants to contribute towards setting up the European fundamental rights for the digital world. We have the ambition in June, during a big event, in Lisbon, the Digital Assembly, to launch the Lisbon Declaration, a digital democracy with a purpose. And this is like a manifesto for an European model with digital transformation based on strong human dimension and democratic values, citizens' rights and freedoms, and place the Europe at the global forefront of a new, safer, and more reliable and competitive digital world. I won't talk about the legislative agenda because it has already been said by especially Thibault and the ambassadors, how important is the Digital Services Package, how important is the Data Governance Act to improve the conditions for data sharing across the Union, but also outside of the Union. And I won't talk about the very important legislative initiative that will come up in 1 month about AI, the new artificial intelligence framework, which we will give a top priority because it's absolutely necessary to set up a trustworthy AI framework to boost its safe development by business, by consumers, and that's something that we will also give a very important attention. Luigi, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you very much. And I think not only myself and many people in Brussels appreciate what are your great job, great work. But let me, and I agree with what Portugal is proposing, but let me add two aspects that I think we should always keep in our mind. And I'm saying this also as a former incumbent for 18 years. Europe, we should always keep market open and competitive. We should fight. The level of competition is very important, because if we lower the competition, there will be less investment and there will be less innovation. So fight for keeping the market open and competitive. Second, we should never give up to do the last mile, what I call the last mile to a real digital single market. We did fantastic things, but we have to remove the last barriers in order to have a real single digital market in Europe. Because, you know, there are some aspects. Otherwise, this is the way, if Europe wants to become stronger worldwide, we have to create a real single market. If we don't have, today I have an Italian number, you have a Portuguese number, does not make any sense. We need to remove all the obstacles that remain in order real to operate in Europe and allow all companies to operate in one single market. I think this will give much more strength to European company and will allow this company to compete worldwide. That's my view. And thank you very much, really, for, as I said, for your great work. And I hope we can count on you, because we like to organize before the end of the Portuguese presidency. We cannot wait other 12 years for the next one, to do something mainly with the industry, to invite representatives of Brazilian and European industry and discuss with them how they see the cooperation and the business opportunity. And I hope, Ricardo, we can count on your presence and your support. Thank you very much. And now let me give the floor to my colleague, my partner in this adventure, Luca. I give the floor to you. I think we have been good, only a few minutes late. And now we have another second great panel. And thank you very much, Ricardo, and thank you to the ambassadors and to Patricia.
Yeah, and let me also join you, Luigi, in thanking Ambassadors Ignacio and Ambassador Manuel, Ricardo, and also the Secretary Patricia for their excellent contributions. It's now time to our EU-Brazil dialogue on digital trade, emerging technologies, and regulations. We have a quite stellar set of panelists joining us. Let me suggest that the panelists now switch on their cameras so that while I quickly introduce them. We start with Carlos Oliveira, Minister Counselor for Digital Markets at the delegation of the European Union to Brazil. Then we'll have José Manuel Fernandez, President of the EU-Brazil delegation of the European Parliament. Then we'll have Jorge Arbache, Vice President for Private Sector at the Development Bank of Latin America. We have Thais Maldonado Mifinegger, who is the Director, the Head of the International Affairs at Anatel. We have Professor Andrea Arenda, Senior Research Fellow and Head of Global Governance, Regulation, Innovation, and Digital Economy at CEPS. We have Luis Moncao, Public Policy Manager at Nubank. And then last but of course not least, we have Emily Rees, Senior Fellow at ESID and Director of Trade and Strategies at ESID. I would like to start with Carlos Oliveira. Minister Carlos, thank you very much for being with us today. And no one better than you knows precisely on the ground what are the next key developments between EU and Brazil in digital policy terms. Thank you very much for being with us today. Before you start, let me just remind you that I will use this non-digital device to signal to all the panelists when they have only 1 minute to wrap up their presentation, so that we finish on time. As we have a quite significant set of panelists, we will have also a good 15 or 20 minutes for debate. Thank you very much. Carlos Oliveira, the floor is yours.
Hello, so good afternoon. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, my first words is actually to address my compliments to the some of the figures of the previous panel that I had the chance actually of meeting at the very last EU-Brazil dialogue that took place by the end of 2019, as said by Ambassador Marcos Galvan just a few weeks before we get into the difficult situation of the pandemic. But there are also a number of other familiar faces in this panel. Jorge Arbas, that I recall of meeting when he was working for the Ministry of Economy, but also Thais Maldonado, that is a close contact in our dealings with Anatel. And also Professor Andrea Renda, that we had the chance of participating in one of our events on artificial intelligence. Nevertheless, going into the more significant aspects, I'm going to see if I can share here a little picture that could be of interest, but in the meantime, I'm going to say a few words about where we stand. Well, as it was already mentioned earlier, we had over the last, let's say, 13 years, annual EU-Brazil dialogues addressing the issues of digital cooperation or cooperation on digital matters between EU and Brazil. And let me perhaps mention that perhaps one of the most interesting things was the fact that we had about 50 million euros that were collectively invested in precisely in developing these two dimensions, the dimension of development of new technologies, but also exploring the opportunities to launch new business ventures. Just for those that actually are now looking at the picture, we can see here, I think very distinctively in the first row, a number of, let's say, well-known figures from the right to the left: Secretary Paulo Alvim, Khalil Ruana, Secretary now Vice Minister Vítor Menezes, and of course Ambassador Marcos Galvan. And I'm just focusing on the top people that are in the front row. But continuing on the key things, one of the things that actually was very much obvious in this was the breadth of topics that we were discussing. We were discussing not only the things that had to do with the technologies that were already mentioned, but also exploring the concrete ways of actually moving these from not only from the lab bench to transform it into ways of actually making useful and important drivers for innovation, for entrepreneurship. That was very much the case of IoT, where we launched, for instance, a couple of projects precisely testing not only the technology, but most importantly, assessing to which extent this technology could really be translated into interesting business ventures. One of the topics was precisely to try out the activities that we were doing in terms of business models supporting, for instance, manufacturing, supporting water management, supporting, for instance, topics around health and care, but also, for instance, just picking up the example of NECOS. Here we had actually people discussing how could be the future of smart grids in Brazil and in Europe, with the participation of not only European companies, but also an Israeli company. And that is just to give, let's say, an example, looking, for instance, into the more specific dimension that has to do with environmental development. We have also the project on high-performance computing for energy that involves a very strong emphasis, puts a very strong emphasis on all the dimension around what we call the new renewable sources like wind, eolic, and electrical production. But coming back into the topics that were at the top of our priorities, we had only in the end of November an interesting discussion with the Minister of Science and Technology to discuss possible applications of high performance computing or supercomputing into the area of new diseases, development of new treatments, including for COVID, of course. And the reason why I'm putting the emphasis on this is perhaps one of the things that it's a very important development, is to find the relevant use cases for the Bella-ELA link connection. It's not just a matter of having a huge capacity, but also identifying the applications that can really make the difference and somehow provide the return on investment that was made by the EU and by Brazil in this area. We had, for instance, on the digitization of industry, a very interesting engagement and involvement of the colleagues in Portugal, profiting from the fact that the European Research Association on Factories of the Future is now being run by the owner of a Portuguese SME that also has a presence in Brazil. And that was actually quite a good way of basically promoting such kind of engagement. We had also a number of interesting visits to countries in Europe to give more visibility and to provide concrete examples of how we can share expertise between EU and Brazil around all these topics. But just to give, let's say, an extra site, we had, for instance, with Anatel over the last year, a number of workshops to precisely discuss and assess how we really share expertise, share experiences about what has been the developments on the EU side around the 5G implementation, and to see how this could really inform the approach that's being developed by Anatel. And this is just, let's say, the tip of the iceberg. It's just, let's say, a very short overview of all the things that we had been doing. Allow me to finish with something that was already mentioned by Luca and several other speakers, which is the issue of data protection, personal data protection. I mean, I had the chance of actually accompanying the whole process, including the very last steps until the promulgation of the legislation by President Temer. And it was really, really a source of great enjoyment to see the excellent collaboration that was developed between the EU colleagues, notably my good friend Bruno Giancarelli, that was actually accompanying, discussing with the people from the Chamber of Deputies and from the Senate who were involved on this, but also continuing such collaboration in transforming this not only into something that is focused exclusively on data protection, but also exploring what is the future. The future is about international data transfers. The future is about more elaborate rules for data governance, because whatever we might say, data is really the engine of innovation in the 21st century. Well, back to you, Luca. I'm very pleased to listen to the rest of the speakers and participate in the discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And yeah, let me also stress that international data transfers are already a very hot topic and will be also one of the key topics of our upcoming Latin American edition of the CPDP, the Computers, Privacy and Data Protection Conference that usually takes place in Brussels. We are going to host this in FGV virtually, of course, in July, and this international data transfers will be indeed one of the hottest topics. Now, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mr. José Manuel Fernandez. Seja bem-vindo, and thank you very much for your time and for being with us today. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to intervene in this event among such distinguished guests and among friends. I have the pleasure to work with a lot of colleagues, and namely with Marcos Galvan. I'm the coordinator in the budget committee, coordinator of the EPP group, the biggest group. I was in the negotiating team for the negotiations of the MFF, multi-annual financial framework. where we have increased the European programs with 16 billions, and namely we have increased important programs like the program for research or Horizon Europe, the program where I am also negotiator, the Invest EU, and programs where we have priorities. And the climate is a priority for the European Union, but the digital is also a priority. In the MFF, that's means with the budget between the multi-annual annual budgets 21 until 27, we have agreed 1 trillion euros for the European Union, but we have also the Next Generation EU, where it's new, where we have 750 billions. The projects need to be adopted until 2023, and they need to be executed until 2026, and is new, is historic. But why? Because we have a guarantee from the budget, and the Commission go to the markets to take 750 billions. It's a proof of solidarity. 390 billions are grants to the member states, and the 360 billions are loans. But the amount for the digital of the Next Generation EU is 20%. 20% need to go to the digital. But we have specific programs to the digital. Connect European Facility, we have 2 billion for the digital. The program for the digital is 7.5 billion also. And we have this financial instrument InvestEU, where we can, where the objective is to invest 400 billion between 21 and 27. I was also, and I'm working in the own resources and new own resources. And about the new own resources, we are working now, and because we have in the interinstitutional agreement, it's binding for the European Parliament and also for the European Commission and for the Council. We need to have new own resources, and these new own resources, its basket need to be sufficient to the repayment of the debt of the 750 billion. And in these new own resources, we have the digital tax. It's a common priority. How are we going to increase fairness in the digital taxation? How are we going to tax the so-called big tech? The principle must be simple. Those who don't pay must pay. Those who benefit from the digital market, like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Zoom, shall pay their fair share. This is what the European institutions state in the decision that I have talked, the interinstitutional agreement, and the Commission need to propose until the end of June a proposal to have these new own resources. But we need to cooperate, and I hope that we can have an agreement at OECD level. And the digital taxation, like the digital economy, we agree that we have no borders. The COVID pandemic brought new challenge, but it will also show us something. Today, there are no borders. Before, also. But today, we understand better that we are all connected. And technology is capable of more than what we use it for. And remote working does not reduce productivity. Much can be done through digital. Like I have said, the digital is a a priority. Digital means also cohesion, territorial cohesion. We need all the territory with access, the fast internet. But we have another challenges. We need the advanced skills, competences, and also skills, improve the skills in this area. And we need the research. And the research is very important. And we have a big program. I have talked about the program of research, Horizon Europe, 95 billion for 7 years. It's expect also that 20% of this amount is for the digital agenda. And at this level of the research, I hope that we can have cooperation, and I hope that we can have cooperation, namely with Brazil. We have a lot of sources in for these investments. That's clear that cybersecurity and the protection or data protection. It's clear that we need to defend this. I support the entrepreneurship, the competitiveness, the productivity, but also the inclusion and the cohesion. The cohesion not at European level, but also at global level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, José Manuel Fernandez, and excellent. I really like the point that very often is not sufficiently underlined of the need of serious discussion on taxation when we speak about digital cooperation. It is an excellent point. And when we speak about resources, and well, this taxation then should be transformed into resources for investments, indeed. And no one better than Jorge Abache from the Development Bank of Latin America is better positioned to tell us how these investments can strategically be directed in order to facilitate digital technologies development and also digital synergies and cooperation between Brazil and Europe. Jorge Abache, thank you very much for being here. The floor is yours.
Okay, good morning to all. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this event on such important agenda. And I am happy to be part of this panel with such a distinguished panelists and guests. Since I am with a development bank, I'd like to share a few comments from a development perspective with a focus on Latin America. There is an indicator that is very telling. According with GSMA, an entity that represents the interests of mobile operators worldwide, 5G adoption in 2025 in the world will be about 22%. In China and other selected Asian countries, 50%. In North America, 48%. And in Latin America, only 7%. This indicator reflects how late Latin America is in adoption of digital technologies and in digital transformation. But one could recall the benefits of being a latecomer in technologies, taking the cases of Japan, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan in the 1950s, 1960s, and the 1970s, and China more recently. Indeed, those countries benefited a lot from that condition to leapfrog, especially in manufacturing and in infrastructure. But leapfrogging in digital technologies development is somehow a lot more complex task. First, a lot more important than adopting and using digital technologies is developing, distributing, and managing those technologies. Indeed, the developers of those technologies deployed business models that easy and access and use of many of those technologies, a kind of commoditization of digital technologies. Think of the cell phones, applications, e-commerce, payment systems, and cloud services. So having access to a given technology may not suffice to improve competitiveness, since a given technology, even the more sophisticated ones, may be a commodity. Income, good jobs, and growth are likely to come a lot more from developing and managing technologies rather than from adopting and using them. Second, the life cycle of technologies has shortened tremendously in recent decades. So catching up in terms of developing technologies is likely to become a lot more difficult in the near future. Think of the 5G and the 6G technologies. Latin America is perhaps in a trap because it is quite late in both technology development and in technology adoption. And the likely consequences are very concerning, going from poverty traps to stagnation to isolation from global value chains. What should Latin America do? First, governments should work with the private sector, the academy, and others to increase access and use of technologies. Think of the immense impact digital transformation may have on financing, small and medium-sized enterprises, education, and mass transportation, and other areas already mentioned by previous speakers. Second, governments and private sectors should work together to realize the immense opportunities in the region in regard to digital technologies needed to develop and industrialize sectors where Latin America is well endowed, including those related to natural resources such as agribusiness, mining, water and forest management, biodiversity, renewable energy, as well as climate change and other sectors. Managing and industrializing those activities require a lot in terms of R&D and highly sophisticated technologies, being artificial intelligence, IoT, Industry 4.0, nanotechnology, biotechnology, new materials, drones, robots, and many others. Latin America and Brazil would benefit a lot from working together with the EU on developing those technologies. Capacity building, more and better access to technologies and technology development could be part of that work agenda. I see a lot of room and will for cooperation and collaboration between our regions on this agenda, as were already mentioned by the ambassadors and other speakers. So I stop here and thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for stressing the need for directing investments to nurture some key strategic areas. I really like the fact that you stressed that Latin America needs to develop technologies, not to adopt them, and for these, a proper policy environment, but also proper investments and opportunities for funding are indeed keys. One of the areas that you stressed is connectivity and the 5G adoptions. No one, I think, better than Thais Maldonado can tell us what is in the pipelines at the Brazilian level with regard to 5Gs and connectivity plans. Thais, an old friend, thank you for being here, and it's a great pleasure to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Luca, for the invitation to be here. And good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. First, I'd like to greet my panel colleagues. It's a big honor to participate in this debate with you. And my name is Thais Maldonado Nifinegger, and I'm currently the head of international affairs at Anatel, which is the telecom regulator for Brazil. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, Anatel was created back in 1997, and it was the second regulatory agency implemented in Brazil. So I was asked here today by Luca two main questions, and I'll do my best to respond them and to be short, so we have more time to debate afterwards. And the first one was, what are the priorities for Anatel to enable the adoption of new technologies and to implement new regulations. And trying to respond to this question, Luca, let me first bring a little bit of context to this conversation. The digital transformation process, as many of you have previously mentioned, has begun several years ago, and it comprehends several issues, from the way companies sell and distribute their products, to the capacity of governments to provide online services to all citizens, and how people use online channels and digital platforms for their business and also for their everyday activities and so on. And we are talking here about the optimization of processes and how digitalization is bringing flexibility and dynamism to organizations, and how people are benefiting from it. And so in all these cases, digital transformation calls for a deep understanding on how the society and the economy is developing, and so government and other stakeholders as well can act timely and effectively to enable this transformation to happen with social inclusion. And in that sense, the availability of the communications infrastructure is a key element for the success of any digital strategy. So we can say that there is no connectivity without telecommunications infrastructure. And we all know that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. So the particularities of each country demand specific policies and a very keen eye from the regulator to address the necessary measures and incentives aiming to expand this connectivity. And at the end of the day, our goal is to bring better services for the consumers at affordable prices while enabling innovation. And Brazil has made significant progress in improving internet access in the past years, also digital security and regulation. Yet there's more that needs to be done to reduce the country's digital divide and to fully embrace digital technologies development for all. And trying to respond to your question, Luca, what are we focusing on? I would say that I can highlight three main things. The first one is regulatory simplification. This process, conducted by Anatel, aims to give more consistency and quality to the rules that govern the telecommunications market, facilitating the understanding of the regulation by the whole society, and also revoking the rules that are no longer justified. So we can prepare and enable the environment that will allow new investments and closing the digital divide and paving the way for a new digital economy society. The simplification process encourages the rules to be more focused on the real problems that affect telecom sector, especially those related to consumers. In addition, this regulatory simplification also makes the environment more conducive to investment, which results the expansion of networks, the quality of services provided, and the prices of these new services to be affordable. This simplification started with a focus on major industry themes, such as granting, licensing, quality, certification, competition, and also consumer rights. To have an idea, between 2019 and 20, we have revoked about 170 resolutions. And today, the process moves forward to address the other rules of the agency that are no longer needed. And we call this process the regulatory guillotine project. And our expectation for the future is to keep this process ongoing, opening space for more competition, and by reducing the regulatory barriers for new companies. And the second point I'd like to bring to you is 5G, of course. And while I was preparing this presentation here, a friend of mine who might be watching us right now asked me, Thais, with the 5G fully operating, will I be able to stream any better my favorite show, which is Big Brother Brazil. And then I said, okay, I have nothing against this particular show. Well, actually, I don't really like it, but let's not miss the point here. And the point is that moving to the next technology generation is so much bigger than that. Having a faster connection, as we experienced while moving from 3G to 4G a few years back, is just a little improvement that 5G will bring to us all. So 5G technology is the foundation for 4.0 massive IoT communication, and it will enable applications, new applications from a range of new technologies, and to bring to us things like autonomous vehicles and e-health solutions, as we are experiencing now in these pandemic times, and the development of smart cities and so on. So we can expect a lot from that. And we have already approved the rules for the auction that is happening anytime soon. We now need the approval of our Court of Accounts, and then we'll be ready to do the auction, and Brazil will benefit from the 5G, as a few countries have already begun. And the third point I'd like to bring to you is closing the connectivity gap. So fixed broadband we all know that fixed broadband is less affordable in Brazil than the mobile one. And we also have a huge gap, in special when we compare urban connectivity with remote areas. So we are focusing on that. And to do that, we need to attract financial resources. And it is a big challenge for us. And for these investments to take place, it is necessary to have funding sources available. And here is where we have sector funds and also developing banks. So, but we also need incentives for the private agents to make these investments. For example, throughout investment obligations in the spectrum auction. And well, we are looking very thoughtfully to this major issue that we still have in Brazil, which is the urban-rural connectivity gap. And despite the progress that we have experienced in the past years, there are big challenges that still remain. And to conclude, my final message, Luca, is that we are trying to do, what we're trying to do is not to impose difficulties for the ICT market to develop, while seeking for every opportunity to maximize social benefit and to foster innovation. And for this to happen, we choose to adopt a light touch regulation and to be open and creative while looking at the future. And I look forward to have a time for discussion with my panel colleagues here. And I give back the floor to you. Thank you, Luca.
Thank you very much, Thais, also for highlighting that there are multiple challenges ahead to solve the digital divides that still are present in Brazil. Anatel is working relentlessly in these. It's also very interesting to see that 5G is considered one of the potential tools, but of course not a silver bullet. There are many others fronts on which it is necessary to work. And also it's very interesting to highlight that the real potential of 5G will not really be watching high quality Big Brother Brazil, but in the massive Internet of Things, industrial Internet, and a host of other new services that we are not yet really understanding very well. To have a better understanding of the potential for cooperation, innovation, and regulation, I think we have the pleasure to have today with us one of the greatest specialists we could have, Professor Andrea Renda. He has been working with regulation of new technologies for several decades. Not to overestimate his age, but just to give a fair assessment of his great work. Thank you very much, Andrea, for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Luca, and it's a pleasure to be with you. And indeed, I've been working on those issues for quite a while, and also been interacting with some of you for quite a while. Greetings to Luigi, of course, and also to my co-panelists, and greetings to Carlos Oliveira, also with whom I've had the possibility to exchange views already in the past. I'll try to do one thing. Maybe I'll give a quick introduction and try to take you into a quick 8-minute long journey. So I don't know if I'll manage. So if I don't, you just signal that to me, Luca, okay? So the first thing I want to say is that we are living in a moment in which we have a number of common challenges, right, between Brazil and the EU. Not only the pandemic, but certainly the urban-rural digital divide that Thais was mentioning. It's something that in the EU we've never fully managed to solve. And the new technological developments are creating that additional divide. The divide might be exacerbated by the fact that changes in the digital transformation will lead many more developed countries to reshore some of the production that had been nearshored inside Europe. So some portions of the territory in Europe might be actually excluded from the future digital transformation. So these internal distributional impacts are actually quite heavily felt. And we're also largely consumers of ICT applications and platforms, both in Brazil and Europe, meaning in Europe, some politicians have gone as far as saying that we have become a digital colony of the United States, or potentially also partly of China. So that is as a background of the things that we might have in common. What we don't have in common is, for example, what Thais was saying about the light-handed approach to regulation, which I think is not what we are seeing in Europe. So let me take you on a little journey, as I was saying. Let me see if you can see now my slides. Since I remember that Luca was quite active in the days of the, I was, the host stopped my sharing. I don't know why. Can you see my screen? Can you confirm, Luca?
Not yet. It was a blank screen. Maybe you could try to show this again.
Yeah, because the host is said it was stopping my screen sharing. So
we should give Andrea privileges.
I do have privilege to share, so you should be seeing my screen now.
I'm seeing a blank screen. I'm not sure the others are. I don't know. The first slide is totally.
Let me share the application itself. Maybe you see it now.
Now we see several layers.
We see the layered architecture of the internet, right?
Yes,
okay. So Luke, I've been studying for quite a while. When you were working on net neutrality, I remember you being very, very active in this field, right? So when the internet started, we used to look at it in a simplified way like this, right? With a physical layer and the traffic rules, the logical layer, the applications that would run on open standards, right? In what we were calling permissionless innovation. And content flowing on those applications, and obviously the end users, right? These were the early days, and basically this structure has been with us for 3 decades, since the World Wide Web has permeated our lives in the early 90s. And indeed, if you look at the whole technology stack, where you could potentially find areas for cooperation over the past 3 decades, you would look at those. You could cooperate on infrastructure. You cooperate on net neutrality, for example, the logical layer. You could cooperate on the application side of the market, so setting rules for applications, and on obviously regulating content, for example, copyright, but also hate speech and so on and so forth. Now, after 3 decades, a first evolution of the internet that we have seen is the emergence of this fat middle on the internet, right? The centripetal forces that have led the internet to be dominated by a fistful of cloud-based platforms. And this is something that has been extremely important to understand where the EU is trying to go now, meaning, and in a nutshell, the emergence of these centripetal forces has been commented upon by many scholars as also coming with a redistribution of market power, but also a geographic distribution of power, in the sense that even in the communication on the digital compass that the European Commission published 3 days ago, the Commission observes that at least 90% of the data related to European users are currently in the hands of US-based companies. And the EU share of the data economy is estimated at approximately 3 to 4%, whereas the EU's share, the global GDP, is around 16%. Now, inequality in market concentration, inequality in the labor market, polarization of jobs, precarity of jobs, and perhaps some concerns emerging on the environmental sustainability of some of these digital technologies. Think about deep learning techniques, but also blockchain mining to some extent, and also data centers more generally, have led the European Union, I can obviously elaborate a lot further, to choose a different path. And also the observation of the fact that perhaps all this data that have been generated by end users will now be a tiny portion of the data that will be generated by the internet, because the next generation will be data generated by things, and the proliferation of the Internet of Things has motivated a set of new policy initiatives at the EU level, some of which would go in the direction of enhanced cooperation with Brazil, but others don't, in my opinion. So the first question that I want to ask you is the question that the European Union is asking itself: as we go for the twin transition, can a digital sector that is today perhaps a textbook example of unsustainability really contribute to the EU's ambition to realize sustainability and resilience? So, in my opinion, what is happening at the moment is the transformation of the original mandate of Vice President Vestager, so the idea of making the EU fit for the digital age, into a spectacular reversal. Indeed, the European Union, with a number of its policies, is trying to make the digital age fit for Europe rather than the other way around. And this has a number, in my opinion, of positive connotations, but also potential risks. Now, the items on the table, I will not elaborate on all of them because they've been listed, in particular in the first presentations, so in the first panel. But there is a set of rules that, in my opinion, will fundamentally change and revolutionize this technology stack, the layered architecture that I showed you at the beginning. So here's how I see the EU approach to the layered architecture at this moment. So first of all, connectivity. Connectivity is not just 5G, obviously, and not even optical fiber. There is a number of things, especially in agriculture, a number of low power technologies in particular that could be much more cost effective than 5G. So I'd like to elaborate a little bit further on this, but I would like to caution a little bit on the enthusiasm on 5G that in many countries is really polarizing and is really catalyzing the debate, in particular on infrastructure. The second thing is the EU is trying to reply to the existence of this fistful of cloud giants with a cloud federation based on Gaia-X, but a federation of technical specifications and protocols that altogether should somehow constrain the way in which cloud services and cloud service providers operate in Europe, constrain in the positive sense, for example, forcing them to comply with GDPR by design, perhaps also to be interoperable and to give access to their data by design. And that is a very important development because it is also seen as a very inward-looking development, if you wish. Some people call it technological protectionism, others call it simply digital sovereignty, but I want to leave this on the table for now. The edge layer is something that is not fully conquered at this stage. So the more decentralized data storage, but also more decentralized artificial intelligence, embedded AI, and more decentralized architectures more generally, coupled with the Internet of Things. This is an area where there is no obvious dominator at the global level, and many European companies want to conquer that space with the help of the European Commission's industrial policy. So I'm going to get back to this in my last slide, which is the next. There will be then a number of additional layers that are being created on the internet that deviate from the original neutrality or say openness of the internet by enabling a lot more control over flows of data, right? And digital verification and identification, legal and semantic interoperability, but also the data spaces and the data strategy. 3, cross-cutting data spaces, skills, Green Deal, public administration, very important for EU and Brazil altogether, but also sectoral data spaces you see on the left in the B2B sectors, which will become now a province of the internet where data are not open, and open data is not cherished or praised anymore, but actually managed data and controlled, shared data become the norm. And the reason for that is that the sharing of data and the shared management of data by real economy players, think about the farmers, the car manufacturers, can enable them to have greater bargaining power vis-a-vis the cloud giants, if you wish. And then together with this, the open internet, the existing already digital platforms in consumer markets, and a digital government space, which can become a platform for further applications. And obviously, hopefully, will still be there, so the end users. Alongside with this, two horizontal developments. One is artificial intelligence, which is not a layer, but a new way of solving problems and doing things at all those layers. And the promise of enhanced user control over personal data through a number of emerging protocols that are not mature enough, in my opinion, but it indeed will determine the end of the open-ended internet, the end of open data, and a much more controlled internet, which is in principle a promise of a more sustainable and balanced internet. So where I see areas for cooperation in this respect, and I only have 1 minute left just to reassure Luca also because I don't see him, I'm sharing my screen, is on the twin transition, technology for sustainable development, including decentralized architecture, low power networks, satellite, think about what Copernicus Sentinel is doing also in agriculture in Brazil. Human-centric AI, well, I've been heavily involved in that, happy to elaborate further. And the research over privacy-preserving technologies, think about federated learning or many, many other technologies. The attempt of the EU to bring in European legislation into software code, such as Gaia X, is a very interesting one because so far, if there is one failure that we can imagine in EU law with respect to the internet is enforcement. We have not managed to really elicit sufficient compliance, even with the GDPR to date. The area of rebalancing competition, so DSA, DMA, plus content moderation online, democracy action plan, where exchange of good practices can be extremely fruitful between Brazil and the EU, with Brazil's very important tradition in this field now. Data governance, and to avoid the value capture and the concentration of value in the hands of the few. That's extremely important for sustainability in all respects. Sectors, they have been already mentioned, so I don't repeat them, but also in the future, high performance computing, and in particular, the digital twin of the earth, a very interesting project that the EU has launched that can have very important sustainability consequences. What are the possible obstacles? I leave them there because someone has to provoke some debate at some point during the meetings like this ones. First of all, what is the commitment towards sustainability of both parties, I would say, not only Brazil, but also the EU is in a situation in which it's looking much more at obviously restoring competitiveness at the moment, and still a little bit hesitating when it comes to its orientation towards long-term sustainability. The arrival of the digital Silk Road in parts of Europe and Brazil with respect to, if compared to the, if you wish, Biden-Harris administration ambition to build a coalition of democracies, that is something that might create tensions in between EU and Brazil. And also, importantly, the fact that many...
Andrea, sorry if I interrupt you, but the time is really over. Sorry, I really have to ask you to really wrap because
this is my last, it's my last bullet point. The fact that the EU is indeed developing its policies with emphasis on digital sovereignty, so that many of the things that we see in Horizon Europe, public-private partnerships, important projects of common European interest, and even data governance provisions are indeed not the best starting point for developing a cooperation with external players. So that said, that's the last point that I had. So over to you, Luca. Happy to further elaborate during the discussion.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for this really intense journey towards within regulation and innovation and what are the perspectives ahead. Now, without losing any time, so that we manage to still have some minutes for debate and also for the wrap up. Considering that we started with 5 or 6 minutes of delay, I would ask you to kindly stay with us 5 or 6 minutes more. I would like to give the floor to Luis Moncao, who was previously a colleague at FGV, Actually, he hired me 6 years ago, and then became public policy manager at Nubank, one of the startup unicorn that Brazil has produced over the past years. Luis, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Luca. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Luis Moncao. I am a public policy manager here at Nubank. And first of all, I would like to thank FGV Law School for organizing and promoting this very interesting conversation. And to say I was really, really glad when I received the invitation from Luca Belli and FGV's team to speak at this event, because it's not only a great opportunity to be back home, as Luca mentioned, but also to talk about innovation. We love to talk about innovation at Nubank. Our business is about innovation. And because this event was framed in a very, very interesting way, so there is an objective here to talk about how we can enhance cooperation between EU and Brazil, and this is very positive for the conversation. So please allow me to salute the other colleagues of this panel as well. Say I'm honored to be among so distinguished speakers. And before I start to talk a little bit about EU-Brazil cooperation, I would like to talk a little bit about Nubank, about what we do, who we are, and why Nubank has been praised as a company that is a case of a successful startup and a case for innovation. And not only a case of these two things, innovation and of a successful startup, but also a case that happened to occur outside of the boundaries of the places we regularly point out that are the places for innovation, such as the Silicon Valley. So we are in Latin America, in South America, in the biggest city of South America, and Nubank has been created here and raised here and became one of the biggest independent digital banks in the world. So for those who don't know, especially those watching us, Nubank is a fintech that was created in 2013, so around 7-8 years ago. And the ambition of Nubank was to fight complexity in the financial services industry and to empower people to take a better or full control of their financial lives. This means to free people from the old, slow, bureaucratic, expensive, and inefficient financial system that we had here in Brazil. Very concentrated market with 5-6 banks controlling a big share of the market. And Nubank has been able to do this through technology, innovation, and what I could say an outstanding customer service to reach more than 34 million customers in Latin America nowadays. So Nubank journey started with, just to give a little bit of context to you, started with the offering of a no-fee credit card, entirely managed by phone, by an app, in a country with huge market concentration, as I said, and with very poor customer experience by customers with the financial system. And eventually expanded the portfolio of products to also offer a fully digital account, and now offer a lot of more services, loans, accounts for small business, investments, and keeps expanding its services. But this led Nubank to reach some very impressive numbers that keeps growing, such as more than 20 million users of the Nubank credit card in the region, and more than 30 million Brazilians using our digital accounts. So some customers have both services, so the sum doesn't lead to 34 million, but we have currently more than 34 million customers and operations in Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia, but also offices in Argentina, Germany, and the US, dedicated mostly to attract the very best talent for the company. As we know that talent for innovation is really a scarce resource, and we keep searching for the best talent around the world. So, well, this is Nubank. I surely could talk a lot more about what we do, but I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about two possibilities of what I think are possibilities for cooperation between Brazil and the EU. And I do believe there is plenty of room for that cooperation, and I'm sure that this goes much beyond the two possibilities I'm indicating here. I heard a lot from the other panelists, very interesting conversation. But the two things I would like to emphasize are these. So the first one is certainly about the governance of data, governance of information, knowledge. We know that as the flow of information becomes easier, it becomes much easier for a lot of different services to emerge, and also a lot easier for financial institutions, especially those built with technology in their DNA, to deliver more efficient services for their customers. So I'll give you a very quick example. Nubank has no physical branches, does not have a place for physical attendance of customers, but reaches customers in every single city of Brazil. So it's more than 5,500 municipalities. Even though we have problems, as mentioned before, with connectivity, not internet for everyone yet, but still we reach customers in every single municipality of Brazil. So this is one example of how information and the changes in the information ecosystem are so important. As a consequence, one of the most important things to debate here in this component of this new information environment is most certainly the regulation and use of personal data. And here is the first topic I would like to highlight as a topic for cooperation between Brazil and the EU. And why is this so important? First, because Brazil has recently passed a data protection law, a very similar law, very important law to protect consumers and customers and citizens. And because this law is very similar in many ways to what we had in the EU directive and what we have right now in the GDPR, the EU General Data Protection Regulation. But it's not only the similarities that matter here. I think the differences also matter. And the first difference, or the most important difference, is that EU and EU countries had at least 4 decades to evolve the system of data protection, learn, create better definitions for what they want to reach as with the law. And in Brazil, we have it's not that we didn't have any law on data protection, but we had patchwork legislation about it. And now we have a legislation that is very similar to the European Union. And there's a lot for us to do to interpret what are the definitions that we have there, how we will define more precisely and ensure legal certainty, not only for companies, but also to ensure that data subjects' rights are enforced and protected, right? I have 1 other minute, Luca tells me, so I'll move to the second point. Just before that, I have to say that there's no way Brazil will reach legal certainty and ensure the protection of consumers' rights without looking into the experience of Article 29 in European Union and now the European Data Protection Board. So this will be essential for policymakers, authorities, companies, customers, everyone. The second point I would like to highlight is the opportunities for collaboration around open banking. So data protection laws enabled customers of financial services to use their data portability rights to bring their data to different companies. And now open banking is becoming a reality in Brazil. And there is a lot I can say because I do participate in the self-regulation process here in the country. And there is a lot to look for the European experience, either in the UK or in other countries in the European Union, to get more information and to evolve our system here. And I talk here both on the regulation side, but also on the technical side to learn how should we build our APIs, how should we create the best user experience, how should we define rights and liabilities, all these kind of things. So these are the 2 things I would like to emphasize. And just to conclude on time, make some final remarks and raise a question for debate. The final remarks is that cooperation goes much beyond regulation. So there's a lot of technical things for us to look into and to cooperate, and a lot of space for research about this. And secondly, that emphasize what other panelists said already, that these are not, of course, the only 2 topics that we can and should search for cooperation. And the question I would like to leave before giving the floor to Luca is, what can we do better to enhance cooperation? So I'm pretty sure that there is plenty of room for more research. So academia has a crucial role of translating what is happening in one place to another. And there is also one thing that is happening here today, that is building better connections between stakeholders, letting people know what they're doing, what companies are doing, what authorities are doing, and build these connections so that we can search for experts elsewhere and build this cooperation. Thank you very much, Luca. Once again, I'll give you the floor and looking forward to participating in the debate.
Thank you very much, Luis. And indeed, one of the main reasons we have organized this first, and I would like to stress first, EU-Brazil conference is because we plan to have more and to catalyze all this knowledge in order to offer more insight on what are the avenues for cooperation between these two huge blocks. Now, without further ado, let me give the floor to Emily Rees. Thank you very much, Emily, also for your patience, for having waited so long. You are Director of Trade Strategies and also Senior Fellow at ESIP. Thank you very much for being with us today and for sharing your insight.
First, allow me to present a big obrigada to EU-Brazil, Luigi, and FGV, Luca, for convening this very timely webinar and inviting me to partake in today's discussions. We have heard so many insightful views on how the EU and Brazil can enhance cooperation in the digital economy and innovation. But for those who have come across my work, you will know that I tend to dedicate myself to analyzing bi-regional trade dynamics in goods, particularly agricultural goods and food products, with always an eye to the continuous improvement of the environmental and carbon footprints in this sector, both in Europe and in Brazil, which is why I'm actually delighted to have the opportunity today to discuss how digital innovation can help us tackle some of our shared challenges. And that includes the digital divide that has been mentioned by several of our fellow panelists today. So when we consider the trade in cheese, wine, beef, or fruits, I think everyone would be pardoned to imagine these are very low technological goods. And in fact, nothing could be less true. Digital innovation is really providing us with the new tools to produce more with less, doing so in protecting the environment and also making our supply chains more resilient, diversified, fair, and transparent for consumers, which is what both consumers on both sides expect. In 2019, for those who haven't been following the EU policy bubble, the EU launched the European Green Deal. It's a new growth strategy to transform the Union into a modern, resource efficient and competitive economy, where basically we want to achieve no net emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050, whereby economic growth is decoupled from resource use, and where no person and no place is left behind. The Green Deal also outlines the very crucial role that needs to be played by digital technologies and has given birth to a number of cross-sectorial strategies, particularly the 2020 Farm to Fork strategy and the Digital Decade communication that was published this week. Starting with the latter, the digital communication proposes a set of digital principles under the Digital Compass initiative that Minister Carlos mentioned in his intervention. And it's basically looking at the potential for digital transformation in 5 key ecosystems, which are manufacturing, health, construction, mobility, and agriculture. Now, agriculture has been identified as a key sector where digital solutions can help to cut GHG emissions by making production processes much more efficient, sustainable, and competitive. It also, digital farming also runs very deep in a number of other initiatives that are proposed by the EU, particularly the Farm to Fork strategy, which highlights the use of nature-based, technological, digital, and space-based solutions to deliver better climate and environmental results. And that's to increase our climate resilience and reduce and optimize our use of inputs and monitor land use. So why is this relevant to EU-Brazil and the economic relationship? Well, because food and agriculture are economic drivers on both sides. And particularly in Brazil, agriculture continues to represent an increasing percentage of Brazilian GDP. Yesterday, we got the new figures for 2020, and agriculture is now contributing in Brazil to over a quarter of GDP, 26.6% to be exact. And so because the investments in smart and sustainable agriculture are happening in Brazil, there's an incentive for Brazil's digital ecosystem to start by providing solutions to farming and thereby permeating into the wider economy. And in that, gaining the economy of scales, which could also allow Europe to adapt and to use many of the technologies which we're seeing being built out of Brazil. And some very practical examples of what this looks like in practice. We're looking at cloud edge computing to look at remotely deployed services at field level to support real-time sensitive solutions for farmers, local and remote sensing. That's allowing applied to crops and livestock. It's increasing production on less land. It's assessing health status, which is very important. Providing users with better tools also to do what we all know we need to do, which is to better integrate our agro ecosystems. Public authorities have also been stepping up the use of digital to ensure environmental protection in this field. For instance, remote censoring has been used by Brazil for quite some time now to verify farmers' compliance with the new forest code. And they've been doing so via multi-spectrum microsatellites, which provide real-time information to public authorities, and that basically allow public authorities to see the percentage of natural vegetation to verify compliance with environmental codes. And that has now been linked to the commercial banking system under the CAR, which basically ensures that the compliance actually has teeth. That actually could be very interesting in the development now of the new strategy in Europe. We're seeing a new biodiversity strategy. We can see how what's already been done in Brazil could actually bring in innovation in Europe, where we're debating the same issues. Blockchain technology is obviously a very important one because the question of food traceability is so important in this relationship, but also for smart insurance contracts. So it's about creating better trust in the value chain and reducing transaction costs. You know, there are a number of startups. I'm thinking of EcoTrace, for instance, which is a company in Brazil that provides full supply chain traceability for beef, cotton, and poultry. And consumers can scan the QR code when they're at retail level to access the full traceability from farm to fork, which is, again, very much in line with what we're doing here in Europe as well. Data analytics are also allowing farmers to make smarter, better decisions, reduce farm level losses, and the reduction of inputs. I'll bring also the artificial intelligence aspect, because that's very important when we're looking at climate change, particularly when we're looking at the impact of climate change on pests and diseases, which we know have more prevalence under the current ecosystems and have devastating effects for our economies when they hit. So we're seeing better monitoring of pests in the fields using AI. And this is obviously very important, not only for production in our territories, but also in the trade, so we can ensure that our trade is safe and not introducing new pests and diseases to each other's territories. Finally, you know, drone technology, autonomous systems, robotics are also providing unrivaled data collection now. And that's very important because it allows farmers to apply plant protection solutions in a much more surgical way and even reduce risks to workers. So agtech is really thriving in Brazil with a plethora of startups, and they look to solve today's and tomorrow's solutions. And beyond the productivity advantages that I've mentioned, we can also see how digital innovation can now help us to resolve some of the more contentious aspects also of our trade relationship. And particularly in the realm of trade and sustainable development, environmental protection, tackling climate change, and ensuring that our supply chains are indeed sustainable and devoid of embedded deforestation. So all of these innovations are so in line with what is being proposed under the EU-Mercosur Free Trade Agreement, and particularly in the trade and sustainable provisions that trade agreement puts forth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily, for these very sharp points. I really like the fact that you suggested that actually digital technology can be used to transform both the existing sector that are already quite strong in Brazil or EU, but also administrations. And there is a lot of work to be done. Within the FGV Law School, we have a project called CyberBRICS that I had the pleasure to coordinate. And we are indeed analyzing digital transformation strategies in the BRICS countries, so Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And there is indeed a lot of interesting initiatives happening, but also a patchwork of initiatives that do not really have a clear strategy in the majority of countries, in the strong majority of countries, I would say. Now, before passing the floor to Professor Renato Flores for the final wrap-up and his synthesis, which I know will be an extremely complex exercise given the wealth of information we have been sharing, we have received a couple of questions. But actually, I'm trying, as we do not have a lot of time, I'm trying to synthesize them into only a twofold question that then you are free to reply as you please. So very quickly, what should be the priorities for further research? And also, what are the areas in which there is already quite relevant research, and what is needed is actions like policy implementation or funding or concrete initiatives that go beyond the research that already exists.
Luca, may I add one question?
Yes, sure.
Yes, I have just one question it's for us, for European and Brazilian. I think one of the major challenges we have in front of us, also with 5G, is how to switch from internet for consumer to industrial internet. Because the problem of 5G is business model. Operators would like to postpone the 5G because they don't see business model. So how you see from your point of view, what should be done in order to work together with the vertical sector? As you see this in Brazil and maybe also Andrea in Europe. Thank you.
So maybe let's pick this specific 5G that should be replied in a tweet or something that is quite concise. And then if anyone wants also to provide a reply in a very tweet-like format to what are the areas where more research is needed and what are the areas where concrete action is needed. Anyone willing to take the floor, please just raise your hand and you will have the floor. We want, please, so I see Luis and then Carlos, yes, and then Emily.
So look,
okay, yes, Luis first.
Okay, I go. So look, answering your question, I think between the two topics I raised, I do think we have a lot of research about data protection. This probably is not a place where we need more research. We need just to translate what will be data protection here in Brazil and evolve our system. And this is something that will be done and led by the Data Protection Authority. But regarding open banking, I see much more lack of research and how this will play out in Brazil. These things are evolving initially yet in Europe as well. So here we probably have more room for cooperation.
Yes, excellent points. Just let me also reply to your point on data protection research that when I was sharing the invitation some minutes ago about this new conference, this new platform that we are creating about the Latin American edition of CPDP, of the Computer Privacy and Data Protection Conference, is precisely to try to fill this gap with a network of experts, a multi-stakeholder network of experts that can also provide research and help policymakers in the better comprehension of data protection, the data protection facets. Carlos, please go ahead.
Well, being very concise, to comply with your instructions, we have actually in the European Union, as part of Horizon 2020, but to be continued actually as part of Digital Europe, we have actually made quite a huge investment of more than 500 million in all kinds of pilots to precisely test 5G, to test IoT in concrete instances of application, smart cities, digital transports and logistics, all the manufacturing that was already mentioned, also the applications very kindly alluded to by Emily on the farm to fork. And this has been really focused not so much about the technology. At most, we could talk about testing the scalability of the technological solutions, but most importantly was about trying out business models, trying out acceptance of technology, trying out framework conditions about some regulatory barriers that could exist, and also what we can do with all the data that is being generated. That's the reason why the issues about governance of data are so important, because it's not just a matter of saying everything is collective ownership, but also find rules that actually secure a good use of these business models, because the business model is very much built on the data. Back to you. I'm being very concise, but this is just to give a little bit of an idea. And this is going to be pursued in the Digital Europe that is going to start in very soon.
Thank you very much for very sharp points and also for being telegraphic. Emily, I saw you willing to provide your inputs. Please go ahead.
Very briefly, and perhaps just building upon Carlos's very good points right now. With hopefully the ratification of the EU-Mercosur free trade agreement, what we're going to see is an increase in trade. The increase in trade will in turn make us all have to look at ESG in much more detail. So that's the environmental, the sustainability, but the governance part is also essential, and the governance of data should also be included into our understanding of ESG. We're talking about a trade whereby, you know, Europe would be exporting more machinery, more IoT into Brazil, and those data flows will certainly have to have some kind of a governance structure. And I think that as Ambassador said earlier today, the agreement currently does not have a digital chapter, which is as extensive as that as we've seen in the EU-UK TCA, but certainly it can be used, the agreement can be used as a building point to build this governance between the EU and Brazil.
Thank you very much. As we are really running out of time, I would suggest to now pass the floor to Renato Flores for his Herculean task of providing a synthesis of all the very interesting ideas that have been shared. I hope Renato is still here, because I'm not hearing him nor seeing him. Renato, are you still with us? I cannot hear Renato Flores. Let's take advantage of this to see if anyone else is willing to provide any final remark. Perhaps Luigi, before we wrap up with Renato, would you like to say anything else?
But I think that just 1 second. I think the debate has been quite interesting, and now we should together think the next step and involve more also in the discussion on the business side, as we said at the beginning, because this sector is driven by the knowledge of the private sector. And I see not only the need to boost further the cooperation between EU and Brazil, but also the need to boost further the cooperation between the private sector and the institutions. So this is an area where I think we should try to, and also identify some concrete projects. For example, what Carlos said, and it's clear that smart city is very interesting. It's an area where Brazil and Europe could do joint project. sister city could do project together, could share experience. A lot of knowledge is needed, technical assistance. This is an area where I see a lot of potential. As agriculture, I agree with what Emily said. Agriculture is very interesting because it's a traditional sector who is transforming, and digital is key and will be more and more in the future.
Indeed, and actually this first EU-Brazil conference was also aiming at identifying core areas in which better coordination, more research, better coordination between investors, business.
Renato is there, Luca. I think
Renato is here. So we have Renato, and now that we are finalizing this conference, let me give you the floor, Renato, for this Herculean task of the wrap-up and takeaways. Thank you very much, Renato, for your patience and for being with us today.
Very much, Luca. I beg your pardon because I had a phone call and I really had to answer this phone call. So very quickly, a few thanks. I thank old and new friends. I thank my very old friend, Luigi Gambardella. I thank the new friend, Luca Belli, this outstanding professor we have in the Faculty of Law. I was surrounded by ambassadors whom I also consider to be friends, like my great friend and outstanding ambassador, Marcos Galvan, the ambassador from the EU here, the Spaniard who speaks the best Portuguese in the world, Ambassador Ibanez, my dear Jorge Abash, and all the other members of the panel. Thank you very much. So I will address 3 points very quickly. First, when we talk about the digital, there is the legal side. Well, the legal side is very important. And in this area, I'm not worried. We have development. EU provides us with very interesting legal documents. Brazil is not bad in this area. I would say we are pioneers in certain aspects. There is a good communication. So please, lawyers, exchange information, start to design new projects on all these very, very tough issues like personal data legislation, because there's still a lot of things to do, as Professor Andrea has warned us. The regulation of big platforms, which is a huge problem, but I feel at ease here. There's a scope for cooperation, and I think the engines for cooperation have started. But the digital is not only legal. A very interesting thing is that the digital became like trade. Trade was invaded by lawyers for the good of trade relations, but then many people, and we do respect a few lawyers, not for instance lawyers like Luca Belli, they start to think that trade was a legal issue. No. Trade is much more than a legal issue. The digital is much more than a legal issue, okay? So 2 more points. Second point, which was raised by Luigi Gambardella, but I think many people didn't hear him. The ambassadors mentioned this, which is the industrial and technological applications. No wonder this was a webinar between European Union and Brazil. So I heard, with due respect, I learned a lot, but I heard here about 20 times people solving all the problems in the digital world. So lists of 10, 15, 20 issues. My God, this is typical, with, I repeat, with due respect, both of the European Union and Brazil. Oh, we have the digital. Look, we had a seminar, we talked about this, and that, and about digital elephants and digital bees and everything. Come on, let us shorten the scope. Let us identify a few feasible goals. And I think that in industry and technology applications and corporations, we should choose one sector, or if you want to use it in smart city, use one city. We had a representative of the government from Sao Paulo. Not Sao Paulo, not Rio, please. They are very confusing, they're too big. But choose a mid-sized city and let's start one application, mobility or data communications, use of clouds in one city, or smart green applications. But let us do something concrete, which will have an outcome that we can generalize, we can exchange between EU and Brazil. But let us shorten the scope. Let us identify a concrete application. So this is my second point, industry and technology. There is a great lack of cooperation. If you talk, people talk artificial intelligence, okay, among the universities, there is cooperation because there is a scientific, a mathematical, statistical aspect of artificial intelligence. But concrete applications, there are no projects. And I think Luca's idea and Luigi's idea is to generate projects, initiatives out of this. So this is my second point, industry and technology. Let us choose one aspect and concentrate and design one or two projects. One or two projects, not 20. Last point, and a strategic point. That's very important. Ambassadors talked about this. Professor Andrea also mentioned there is a strategic dimension in the digital. We are entering a world after the pandemic, which will be a chaotic world. Very, very chaotic. And it's clear that the European Union, and I think it is right in this point, wants to play solo without struggling with the United States, nor with China. Look at the comprehensive investment agreement they signed with China on December 30, one day before the end of the year. And Mr. Biden's foreign secretary said, no, European Union, Brussels, wait. We must give the green light to the agreement. We must analyze it. And the European Union said, bye-bye, it's signed. So European Union has a comprehensive investment agreement with China, has a free trade agreement with South Korea, has a free trade agreement with Japan, has an EU-Mercosur, which I understand completely that poses problems, but it's a very important agreement, must be ratified. Look, with these four things, we start to have a leak. We start to have an alliance. What is going to govern the world beginning in the second semester of this year is shifting alliances. This is my view. I'm writing a book on this. Sorry for the propaganda, but I think the world will be ruled by shifting alliances. And here we have an enormous scope for a very interesting alliance, which will encompass the digital, and I think the proofs are in the whole seminar. Many presenters showed a lot of convergences and divergences that can be coped with between Brazil and the European Union, and an alliance which can even be broadened. For instance, can encompass trade. We have a new DG, an African lady in Geneva, and there will be a lot of discussion about refunding, reshaping the WTO. The same alliance applies. Imagine if the European Union comes together with Brazil, Mercosur, South Korea, Japan, and with a certain understanding with China. Come on, that's the glory of the European Union. That's the glory of these middle powers. So I end with this third dimension, strategic, and it's based in forging and deepening the existing alliances. And in the case of Brazil, the EU-Mercosur agreement. Thank you very much, Luca. Thank you very much to all the other speakers. Okay.
Thank you very much, Renato, for these glorious last points and for combining very skillfully legal, technical, and strategic points. The synthesis has been a great achievement as usual, and I really look forward to reading your upcoming book on shifting alliances. With having said that, I know if Luigi wants to have the pleasure to close this event. I thank you. I thank all the participants for the excellent presentations and excellent also points that you raised as suggestions for future research cooperation and events. This has been the first EU-Brazil conference, and there will be a second probably in June toward the end of the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union. It has been an excellent first step, I hope, in the very promising direction. Please, Luigi, the floor is yours to conclude.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's very late. Just very few words. Thank you to everybody. And also, I hope that Renato, we could count on also in you in order to continue such a dialogue, and also to, as I say, I agree on the point of to be concrete and focus and identify something that we could do together, and we could show only doing things we can improve the situation. So thanks for this advice, also to be focused and concrete.
Thank you. Bye-bye to all. Thank you very much for the excellent event.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you for your great work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to FGV.
Valeu. Obrigado. Ciao.
Thank you all.